Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back. This is my Rebelle video where I'm going to do watercolor portraiture in a really loose style. I want to thank all my Patreon supporters for this video idea. I recently did a poll and I said, what do you guys want to see? And people were kind of divided between landscape and portraiture. And then I did another poll. I want to see what software people were interested in, and they said we want to see Art Rage and Rebelle videos. So my last video was a landscape in Art Rage. This video is going to be portraiture in Rebelle. And the reason I chose this is because I finally found something that's kind of like my thing. If you want to see my setup for how I like to paint in watercolors in Rebelle, this is the video for you. If you are a Patreon supporter, you guys already have my brushes, and you're going to love this because you get to see how I use them. Hopefully it's helpful, but you don't need my brushes to make this work. This is just kind of my setup and my way of working, and I hope it helps. So let's get to it. The first thing you see in this video is that I put down what's it called? Like a plumb line or like an axis line for the head. So that's a tilt, right? You can see that tilt of the head. I don't always put that down when I'm drawing a portrait. In fact, I don't often do it at all, but I figured, like depending on what level of artist you are or what experience you have with portraiture, it might be helpful if you had little axis lines for the angle of the head. Also for the elevation of the eyes and the angle of the eyes and nose, mouth, etc. So I laid that down on a separate layer, and then what I did was just got kind of my standard, kind of my go-to watercolor brush, and you can see the amount of water, the size, the opacity that you have there. I even left like the custom brush settings up so you can see that too. I want you guys to have like everything that I have, as you work on this stuff. And then I started with the hair. And the reason I start with the hair, the dark parts of the hair, the dark shapes of the hair, is because hair is risk-free. I love painting hair because while a portrait, like the features of the portrait, they have to be accurate, if it's going to be a portrait. Otherwise, it just looks like, a person, or maybe a person with some semblance of the person you're drawing. But the hair changes, it moves. People move it around with their hands, or it moves in the wind. Even as they talk, hair pieces are falling, and people are tucking them behind their ears and stuff like that. So you don't have a lot of risk when you start painting with the hair. And it's kind of a nice way to warm up. Ideally we would warm up before we start working, but if you're like me, your life is crazy busy and you just need to kind of like get right into it. So I always loosen up by painting the hair first. It's also really fun because stylistically, you kind of get to design the hair, knowing that it is a little bit posable. You don't have to follow exactly what's going on with your reference. So it's nice to be able to sort of include and disclude and choose what you want to have in your picture. So then after that, the next thing is just the eyes. I like to move into eyes and eyebrows right away, and that helps me find that proportion of the face. So I know how large the forehead is, and that's going to tell me, how far apart the eyes should be, and everything starts to fit into place once I kind of get that initial proportional relationship established. So in this case, it's going to be that anchor between like the line of the eyes and the line of the hair, and you kind of find the size of the forehead, and that helps you find everything else. A quick tip for noses, especially like noses in this case, when you have a nose where like the camera is a little below the model when getting the image, the nose gets surprisingly close to the eyes. And whether you have to use your fingers to measure, or you just try to like use any kind of way to get your brain to grab onto the proximity of the tip of the nose to maybe like the tear duct, for example. Finding that proportional relationship, especially with a photo that's not at eye level, is super important, and will help get those relationships between that, again, like the elevation of the eyes, the elevation of the nose, and then following that, the elevation of the mouth. I typically like to work from top of the head down when I find my proportions. Some people like to start on the eye and then they work kind of out from there. For me, I kind of like to be a little bit of like a global thinker when I work, and like to build up the image kind of all at once. But when I am doing an image like this, where all I'm doing is getting my dark values in, I like kind of to start at the top of the head, find then where the eyebrows and eyes go, then the nose, then the mouth, then the chin. That just helps me stay organized. And I don't know how you guys like to work, but that's my strategy. I have a friend who's just, a massively good artist, and he always starts with like the left eyebrow, like that. We all have our thing, but for me, that's what works. That's what helps me keep my proportions in check, and helps me, do a good job. And that's my comfort level, is just to do that. But I also wanted to point out something, kind of a technical thing, is that when I'm working on this, I'm still not super familiar with Rebelle. Like I'm more of a dabbler in Rebelle still. I still have like Art Rage and Photoshop are my kind of home. That's like my comfort zone. Those are the softwares that I use when like a client says, "Hey, I need this," or whatever. That's what I use. But I want to be more comfortable with Rebelle, and I want to get better at it. So this video is really helpful with that. Every video I do with it's helpful with it. And what I'm trying to do is figure out the setup that works for me. So again, in this case, I'm using the Japanese paper, my own custom brushes. I think I have the watercolor presets. Yeah, I have the watercolor presets showing, so you can see how I have my bleed and my drip and my edges all kind of there, so you can change all those settings. Another setting that I think does look really nice though is the Japanese paper default settings. Like, so you can choose from default, you can choose from these different kind of presets, and the default is good, I think, and so is the Japanese paper one. So that's both, like, there is an actual Japanese paper canvas that you kind of work on as a surface, but then there's also a setting for that, for the behavior of the liquid media on that paper. So both of those are, things you can tinker with, which is pretty cool. Another thing I wanted to just point out as I'm working is, even though I'm very fond of these brushes that I made for Rebelle, I'm not still, super comfortable with it yet. And so, I'm not at that point where I can almost like just kind of close my eyes, put on some good music, and just jump into it and get into that flow state. What I have to do is I'm sort of like tentatively, I don't know. It's like a kid exploring, that part of the pool where their feet can barely touch, and then they go off into the deep end. It's like, that's kind of like where I am all the time with Rebelle right now, where I'm like, I think I know, and I'm not sure. And I really love to be able to share videos with you while I'm working in that sort of lack of familiarity, because then all I can lean on really is my fundamentals, and I think I don't tell you that to be like, like to warn you off of this stuff, because, or my videos about Rebelle, because I feel like I can get good outcomes with it. It's just that it's not automatic to me, and I really think that that's beneficial. There's when you're working with someone who's like a master painter, I'm not making any labels or claims for my abilities here. I'm just saying, like, if you got someone who's a master painter, like say they're an oil painter who's like highly decorated, and they are in shows across the country, and they've been doing it for decades, and they pick up gouache, well, they're still going to be really competent with gouache. They may not be like winning every show with it, but their fundamentals are strong, and their painting chops they're great, so they can kind of pick up any tool and make it work. And that's kind of what you want. You want to have good, strong fundamentals, so that whatever tool you're using, you can get something out of it. And the good, strong fundamentals here are obviously, there's the drawing fundamentals, which is, let's think of the 3 Ps. We've got proportion, perspective, and placement. And those are kind of your drawing fundamentals. And I think those 3 Ps are really key. And you can see it here, the perspective is what's shaping the relationship of the placement of the nose to the eyes, and so on. And it's it's that idea of placement, which was not that important in this piece, but is super important in a lot of compositions. This one was just sort of like a sketchbook approach, so that you got the floating head in the middle of the canvas. There's no compositional interest there at all. It's just as basic as it gets. But then that proportion piece. Proportion is everything in portraiture. You've really got to get proportion down. So those are your fundamentals when it comes to like the drawing part of a painting. And then when it comes to the painting piece, we're looking at value and tone. We're looking at the mark making and brushwork. We're looking at some color theory and color harmonies. We're looking at just kind of some core competencies around like wet media and how you handle that. So there's some interesting things that are happening there with the drawing and with the painting in a digital work like this. So what I wanted to do in this case is just keep it to like a 4-color, 5-color illustration. And I was really drawn to that graphic quality of the photograph as well. To me, it could have read as like a posterized image with just a few simple colors. So I looked at that and I knew immediately with the warms and the cools, it was that kind of these peachy colors and then these like teal colors. It was just this nice complementary color scheme. And I thought that there's like almost no way to mess this up. So while I was exploring my brushes and exploring watercolor and exploring surface, I wanted to explore all that in a newish piece of software with a high success probability, using an image with a strong design principle. So I was going to be led here by value and then the complementary color scheme. And then I just wanted to play with brushwork and see what the software could do to, let me enjoy myself around those core goals. And I think it really worked. It was really, really fun. And, you can see here, I'm just playing around with skin tone and the same kind of that. But then I think, I don't know if I want that much of that orangey, peachy color. I just want it to be more of an accent pop. And think of this as almost like the loosest version of a sketchbook study. And then I think the fun part of that is you try to figure out, well, what's the least amount you can get away with, including and have it still work. And how simple can you keep it? And that's kind of one of those, that's very subjective. But to me, we're pretty close to that point, as it is. Like it's got about as much information as you need to make it work. I think the thing that I want to do at this point, though, is clean up some of the darker values that got lost when I laid in some of those peachy oranges. And then the other thing is just give some, establish some of the structure around her features, of the features of her face and the kind of flowy wispiness of the hair. I think it needs to have some of the geometry of her clothing and some of the like implied structure that will have, that will help with. Because right now, it's loose, it's free, it's simple, but it's just a little too insubstantial at this point. So my instinct at this point in the painting is to go find some of the structures that I know I just haven't gotten to yet. So whether that's if you want to accentuate, in this case, I decided to accentuate a little bit like the collar of the jacket. And then I really want to go in there and establish a little bit of the sleeve and the shadow and the cuff of the sleeve of the jacket. Those kinds of things I feel like are going to be pretty important. And this is one of those where you could really push this a long, long way and keep going and keep refining and keep adding color, and it would be beautiful the whole way through. But it's like I have a friend that cooks like authentic Italian cuisine. He's like, every time every recipe I choose is like 5 ingredients or less, and that's kind of the approach for this painting. Is it's like I wanted to have the most minimal ingredients with the maximum impact, and whether it's so just a little bit like that cooking metaphor or analogy. I think that works for what I was trying to do here today. And it worked well enough. Like, I'm happy enough with it right now, even before I'm, quote unquote done with it, that I just know that I want to spend more time with the software. And I think that's a good sign, is, that there's some promise there, that there's some good fruit that you still need to ripen up with some practice, and then you can bring some interesting things out of this. I also love this because it really does push my traditional art thinking a little bit. I think it works best in the way that, like, it works best in the same way that, like, traditional painting works best, and that is considered brushwork, considered value development, getting accurate tonal relationships, interesting brushwork. While I lean on all that stuff for pretty much all of my paintings, digital or otherwise, this particular way of working in Rebelle, it really, really rewards that. So I think what I need to do now is go do like 14, 15, 16 more portraits, and just kind of do a lot of repetition with this technique, and start to play with more or less colors, start to play with more or less brushes, start to play with more or less opacity. I definitely need to do one with the gouache brushes that I made, and I definitely need to share those to my Patreon too. But that's kind of where this puts my head. It turns on that student part of my brain where I want to learn, I want to practice, I want to explore, and I always love that. That's one of my favorite places to be as an artist and in life, just that kind of very curious place. So with this demo, I hope it was helpful to you. I played it back to you in real time. At first I thought I was like, I'm going to speed this up a little bit when I do the replay, but no, it's a real time. This is as it happened. This is, as I'm thinking through it. So if it's slow for you, I apologize, but maybe it's that kind of thing where you can do a paint along, because it's so slow, you can kind of just work along with it. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully this helps, and look for more, because I've got the thirst for a little bit more of this. And thank you guys so much for your support. Best wishes and happy painting. Thank you.